The quiet hours of the night often bring a familiar, suffocating companion. It is the creeping dread of the unknown, the relentless parade of hypothetical disasters that the modern mind conjures when left to its own devices. We lie awake agonizing over the sudden loss of a career, the potential betrayal of a loved one, or the sudden onset of a devastating illness. This instinct to run from our darkest thoughts is deeply human, driven by a desperate desire for comfort and certainty in an inherently unpredictable world. Yet, the harder we try to push these terrifying phantoms away, the more power they seem to wield over our waking lives. Over 2 millennia ago, a group of radical thinkers proposed a profoundly counterintuitive practice to dismantle this exact psychological torment. Instead of fleeing from the shadows of potential catastrophe, they deliberately walked into them. This is the practice of Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. It is a core pillar of Stoic philosophy designed not to drag the mind into despair but to immunize it against the paralyzing shock of misfortune. By willingly visualizing the very worst outcomes life could deliver, these ancient practitioners discovered a secret gateway to profound inner peace. To the uninitiated, this mental exercise sounds like a recipe for chronic pessimism or a superstitious invitation for bad luck. But the premeditation of evils is a deliberate clinical engagement with reality. You sit quietly and vividly imagine the loss of your wealth, the collapse of your reputation, or the sudden departure of those you hold dear. You do not dwell there to suffer prematurely, but to map the terrain of the worst-case scenario. By exploring the depths of potential ruin in the safety of your own mind, you slowly strip the unknown of its terrifying ambiguity. This armor of the mind was forged in an era defined by brutal volatility. In ancient Rome, fortunes were seized overnight, emperors handed down sudden death sentences on a whim, and plagues swept through crowded streets without warning. The philosophers of this time did not have the luxury of toxic positivity or the illusion of ultimate safety. They understood that survival required a psychological resilience that could withstand the sudden collapse of everything they held dear. To them, hoping for the best without preparing for the worst was an act of profound intellectual negligence. Seneca, a statesman of immense wealth and influence, understood this precarious balance better than almost anyone in the empire. Despite living in palatial estates and advising the most powerful man on earth, he knew his position was incredibly fragile. He recognized that the comforts surrounding him were not permanent possessions, but temporary loans from a highly unpredictable universe. To prevent his mind from becoming soft and dependent on luxury, he actively engineered periods of self-imposed hardship to test his own endurance. He would leave his silken beds and extravagant feasts to spend days wearing rough, coarse clothing, eating only the stalest bread, and sleeping on the unforgiving floor. During these deliberate immersions into poverty, he would ask himself a simple, transformative question about whether this was the condition that he had feared. By physically and mentally inhabiting the space of his deepest anxieties, he demystified the experience of ruin. The monster hiding in the dark was dragged into the unforgiving light of reason, revealing itself to be entirely manageable. This deliberate exposure therapy breaks the invisible chains that fear wraps around our decision-making. When you realize that you can survive the loss of your status, your comfort, or your wealth, a profound liberation takes hold. You are no longer a hostage to the threat of deprivation. The mind, having already rehearsed the tragedy, finds a quiet confidence in its own enduring capacity to adapt, rebuild, and find meaning even in the ashes of former glories. The ultimate test of his ancient counsel arrived when the political winds shifted and he was ordered by the Emperor Nero to take his own life. Because he had spent a lifetime practicing the art of losing everything, including his final breath, he received the sentence without panic or pleading. He comforted his weeping friends, his mind entirely unshakable in the face of the ultimate terror. The premeditation had worked exactly as designed, transforming a moment of horrific tragedy into a profound display of philosophical dignity. We see this same unyielding resilience at the opposite end of the ancient social hierarchy. Epictetus was born into slavery, enduring physical abuse that left him permanently disabled, possessing absolutely nothing of material value. Yet he emerged as one of the most brilliant minds of his generation, teaching that true freedom has nothing to do with external circumstances. His entire worldview was built on a foundation of radical acceptance, forged in the crucible of a life where pain and subjugation were daily realities. His teachings introduced a razor-sharp framework for managing our anxieties, fundamentally anchored in the dichotomy of control. He taught that we must meticulously divide the world into two categories, separating the things we can control, like our judgments and actions, from the things we cannot, like the weather, the economy, and the opinions of others. Premeditatio Malorum is the active practice of recognizing that everything outside our direct control is vulnerable to destruction. By anticipating the loss of these external things, we stop tying our emotional stability to their unpredictable existence. His instructions for applying this concept were famously uncompromising, designed to jolt his students out of their complacent attachments. He advised that when you are kissing your child or your spouse goodnight, you should silently remind yourself that they are mortal and they may not wake up the next morning. It is a chilling thought to the modern sensibility, seemingly devoid of warmth or comfort. Yet the intention behind this brutal honesty is not to foster a morbid obsession with death, but to shatter the illusion of permanence. The profound empathy hidden within this harsh exercise becomes clear only when you put it into practice. When you truly internalize the fragility of the people you love, petty arguments instantly dissolve into insignificance. You do not take their presence for granted, nor do you waste precious hours holding on to bitter resentments. The anticipation of loss breeds an intense, desperate gratitude for the present moment, transforming ordinary interactions into sacred, fleeting gifts that must be cherished right now. Centuries later, the battlegrounds have shifted from marble columns to glowing screens, but the fundamental human struggle remains identical. Today, our anxieties are triggered by an overflowing inbox, a volatile stock market, or the looming threat of a sudden health crisis. We spend vast amounts of energy trying to construct perfect, impenetrable bubbles of security around our lives, buying insurance for every conceivable disaster, while our internal landscapes remain fragile and terrified. We are desperate for anxiety relief, yet we look for it in all the wrong places. To conquer fear in the modern world, we must revive the practice of looking directly at the things that terrify us most. If you are terrified of losing your job, sit down and write out exactly what that would look like. Trace the sequence of events from the moment you are fired, to the conversations you would have to navigate, to the adjustments you would make to your daily budget. Force your mind to walk step by step through the dreaded scenario, refusing to let the imagination stop at the moment of initial shock. As you mentally construct the aftermath of the disaster, a remarkable psychological shift occurs. You begin to see the practical steps you would take to survive. You realize you could update your resume, lean on your network, or perhaps even embark on a completely new career path that you had previously been too afraid to consider. The worst-case scenario transforms from a black hole of endless despair into a difficult but entirely navigable set of practical problems to solve. This mental rehearsal can be seamlessly integrated into the very beginning of your day, setting an unshakable tone for whatever follows. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, famously began his mornings by reminding himself that he would encounter people who were meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He did not do this to become cynical, but to ensure he was never caught off guard by the inevitable friction of human interaction. By anticipating bad behavior, he protected his own peace of mind from being hijacked by the flaws of others. When you start your day expecting traffic jams, delayed flights, and difficult colleagues, you build a fortress around your emotional baseline. You are no longer ambushed by the trivial frustrations of reality. You are actively waiting for them. When the inevitable inconvenience arrives, it does not spark outrage or ruin your afternoon. Instead, it is met with a calm nod of recognition. a quiet acknowledgement that the world is behaving exactly as you predicted it would. This approach stands in stark contrast to the modern obsession with toxic positivity, which insists that we must constantly manifest good vibes and ignore any negative possibilities. Ignoring the potential for failure or tragedy does not make us safer. It makes us incredibly fragile. When we refuse to look at the shadows, we ensure that the first sign of genuine adversity will completely shatter our worldview. True resilience is not built on the delusion that bad things will never happen, but on the unshakable certainty that we can handle them when they do. Stoic philosophy demands that we look into the abyss of human vulnerability without blinking. It asks us to accept that our health can fail, our fortunes can vanish, and our reputations can be destroyed by a single misunderstanding. This is not a philosophy of despair, but a philosophy of profound courage. By accepting the worst that fate can offer, we reclaim our agency. We declare that while the universe may take everything we own, it can never take our ability to respond with dignity, reason, and virtue. The most surprising byproduct of this relentless preparation for disaster is a deep, abiding sense of joy. When you fully accept that everything you possess is merely borrowed from fortune, you stop clinging to it with white-knuckled desperation. The fear of losing your wealth or status evaporates, replaced by a light-hearted appreciation for the time you are allowed to enjoy them. You walk through life with open hands, grateful for the blessings of today precisely because you know they might be gone tomorrow. Zooming out to the broader scale of human existence, we realize that we are all walking on fragile ice, navigating a universe governed by forces entirely indifferent to our personal desires. Every civilization, every great monument, and every seemingly permanent institution is subject to the relentless erosion of time and chance. Understanding our small place in this vast, unpredictable cosmos is not meant to diminish our worth, but to free us from the exhausting burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Nowhere is this liberation more necessary than in our modern, paralyzing fear of failure. We are conditioned to tie our entire self-worth to our achievements, terrified that a public stumble or a failed venture will permanently define us as inadequate. This ego-driven terror prevents us from taking meaningful risks, keeping us trapped in stagnant careers and unfulfilling relationships simply because they offer the illusion of safety. We are so afraid of falling that we refuse to climb. To dismantle this specific fear, we must actively rehearse the experience of total public failure. Imagine the project collapsing, the investment going to zero, and the critics laughing at your attempt. Sit with the sting of that imagined humiliation until the emotional fire burns itself out. What remains in the ashes of that mental exercise is the realization that your core identity, your ability to reason, and your capacity for moral choice are completely untouched by the failure. You are still breathing. You are still capable. This is the profound inner peace that settles into the mind of the prepared practitioner. It is the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who has stared down their worst nightmares and realized they are still standing. The world loses its power to intimidate you when you have already accepted its harshest terms. You move through life with a calm, measured strength, no longer wasting your precious energy trying to outrun the inevitable storms, but simply preparing your ship to sail through them. Embracing Premeditatio Malorum is the ultimate act of rebellion against the tyranny of fear. It is a deliberate choice to stop living as a hostage to anxiety and to start living with profound purpose and clarity. By preparing for the worst, the Stoics taught us how to truly appreciate the best, transforming the unpredictable chaos of life from a source of endless dread into a magnificent, fleeting opportunity to practice virtue. In the end, the premeditation of evils is not about dying well. It is the ultimate masterclass in how to truly live.